Welcome, thrill seekers. We're right back where we ended off last time. If you haven't seen the series before, welcome back. This is How to Make Comics, where you'll literally see me make a comic from the sketch phase all the way up to the final stage. So, last time I was talking about the importance of titles for comic books, right? As you can see here, I just drew out a square. I think that's an important thing, to sketch out the composition first and foremost. Sketch out the entire idea that you have in mind before you even remotely begin. You have to have a good balance, enough to know where the text is going to be. You need to know where the characters need to be. And you can see even here in the sketch phase, I'm already developing the concept of a foreground, midground, and background, right? You have to have layers and depth to your art no matter what's happening, right? So you have to kind of figure out exactly what it is you want to put on the page. So the importance of comic books isn't just, the stories and all that stuff. At the end of the day, you're making a product that you intend to sell, right? Ultimately, you want to have a story that lasts generations, that inspires millions, right? That has themes that are deeper than intended originally. But ultimately, the core of it is a product. Ultimately, the appeal of it is that it's a tangible book, something you could hold with your very hands. That is something that will never go out of style. People say, things like webtoons or online reading comics and, Comixology and things like that, or Kindle. People say that, the comic book medium will one day, vanish or go away or something. Ultimately, these fears have begun since the beginning of time. Ever since the medium began, ever since the first comic book was ever made, people always assumed it was going to be the end. There's no need to be such a hater, such a doomsayer, right? Such a doubtful and fearmonger. You are the next generation of comic book artists. It is your task. It is your duty to build yourself into the best artist you can be. You have to rise to the task. You have to become better than what you are. You know you can be more. And that's ultimately what superhero stories and narratives represent. Heroes typically represent the culmination of our inner strengths, our ambitions, right, our motivations, the very best of humanity at the forefront, right? I spoke about this briefly in the creation of, a hero, and I spoke about the opposite effect in the creation of a villain. The importance of a hero and a villain, it's the duality of psychology, right? It's ultimately the intense motivations behind everyone, right? We all have a little devil and angel on our shoulders. We have to somehow find a way to carry that, our own interpersonal struggles, our daily concepts, our daily ideas. We have to put that onto the page, and we have to put that into the story and the narrative, because ultimately artists tap into the abstract. We are here for a reason. We are here to not only teach and educate and entertain, but we're here to motivate the future. We're here to enlighten the people. We're here to move them forward. So, I personally think that comic books are the best medium to do this, because it involves both written language and imagery. This is, quite frankly, more advanced than hieroglyphics ever were, and if not more so. So, what is the most important part of a comic? Besides the characters, besides the foundations, right, the psychological and metaphorical, we're here to make something that absolutely outlives us all, right? Even if it all goes to hell one day, the entire point is to leave your mark behind as an artist. Ultimately, all we have is our work to represent us. So, I think that the most crucial part of a comic book is the comic book cover. Now, I know that may have seemed a little bit dramatic. Go ahead and watch the Why Villains Are Important video, the how to make an iconic villain, right? I also touched briefly on it, again, like I said, in the heroes. It's really, comic books are much deeper than we originally intended, and much more meaningful than we realize. So, let's get down into the basics. We're gonna basically use everything that we've learned throughout this whole, the entire series: character design, anatomy, shading, composition, values, right? Spotting blacks, right? Using the just solid black and white to figure out what we want to give emphasis to, right? We're going to use absolutely everything we learned, right? Color, all that stuff, texture, right? We're going to put all of this into perspective, and we're going to basically use it all to the best of our ability, combining it all into a perfect kind of combination. Let's say we've already sketched out the entire book. Now we need to have something that represents what that book means. Personally, I love having a comic book cover represent the experience of the book itself. Whenever I began with my own original work, right, and go check out Junket on Amazon so you could see what a real comic is, a real original self-published comic, you have to go figure out what, ultimately this is a story that represents a person who is lost in their life and a person who's divided by their own demons, their own morals. I wanted the book's cover to highlight this experience. I wanted it to be something that was not only comedic, but also traditional, but also modern in a whole new way. It's familiar but different, right? Arguably, my art style is very specific, and it might not be exactly how you might start off. However, you have to understand that the comic book cover is very, very important, right? It's the selling point of the book. It's going to be the thing that's literally put upon, a wall of books, and yours has to stand out amongst all of them, right? In the beginning, early times, in the golden ages of comic books, they would literally play with the high value, vibrant colors. These were things that were mass produced very cheaply. Comic books back in the day had no perceived value, no actual tangible perceived value. However, as time progressed, we clearly realized that even some of the most limited prints, some of these early books, some of these cheap little, mass-produced things can go for thousands, if not millions of copies, right? All of these things are put into these plastic cases and displayed on walls and in museums and things, right? People don't understand that these things still have value today. It may not be, super valuable tomorrow or the next day after that, but think about the speculator boom, right? We have to talk, briefly, all the way from the golden age, all the way from the anthologies and the early kind of horror and science fiction things from the 50s, 60s, 30s even, right? All of the animation inspired things with the cartoons. We have to realize that these things were simply commercial. These things were simply meant to be reproduced thousands of times, right? So I want to begin with the beautiful iconic covers of the golden age. We have to realize that these things were quite literally building the foundations, the building blocks to the entire medium as a whole. There was no such thing as a comic book until these things were literally cemented into history and into pop culture. So we have to remember, these are things that were in the hands of soldiers. These were things that people brought overseas. They were pirated, they were copied, they were translated, they were passed around for decades. These are things that are precious to people. These are things that are important to them. These are things that literally made their childhood. We have to remember that these things hold value in people's eyes. Remember that these things, these books, these simple little images ultimately create multi-million-dollar companies and foundations and empires and monopolies, basically, off of little scribbles and little panels and little cartoon characters, right? Maybe it's not something to scoff at. Maybe it's something that could be much more important if we really paid attention to it. And if we were to craft it, orchestrate it, right, by design from literally the ground up, if we were to make it something that's beautiful, that's worthwhile, and that literally outlasts all perceived time, if we make something that is made for the next generation, then you never know how far it might go. So I wanted to look back at the specifically Marvel and DC's Golden Age era. Specifically, the birth of the superhero. Everyone understands and knows the symbol without even saying the word. The birth of the superhero originated with Superman in Action Comics. We can see the most iconic image of all comic book history. We are enthralled with this massive car, this figure, this Herculean kind of modern mythological being, right? Same goes for Bob Kane's and Bill Finger's The Batman. We have to see this dark, ominous being of the night, this creature, this demon, right? And these first iterations, these characters were raw, unfiltered. We see the strength of the individual minds, right? Of both men and women being triumphed on these covers. These things were groundbreaking at the time, and why not use them for reference? Honestly, these early covers are bold, right? Specifically, those 3 DC covers are something that are literally stuck in our minds forever. They've been reprinted till this very day. And no one can forget the most iconic thing from Marvel being Captain America punching Hitler. That image alone, not only was it reinvented in the movies and reinvented throughout all these other characters, that was an integral part of human history and of American history, right? This was in the middle and the brink of a war. Before America even joined the Second World War, we saw this very brutal, very unfiltered image that, frankly, if we were to do something like this today, people would, be triggered or offended or say, oh, this is wrong. Or think about the courage that Jack Kirby and Joe Simon must have had in order to truly do this. One of the things we most definitely see echoed throughout these Captain America covers is that there is a sense of dynamism. Jack Kirby absolutely loved to put as much as possible into these covers and to immerse us with perspective, with lines, with death, with violence or action right in the middle of it. We captured it as soon as it was happening, right? All of the story would culminate into this thing. Ultimately, these comic covers represent the experience that you're about to get immersed into. They're meant to be literally the attention grabbers, the things that draw us into the story, that wrap us into their world, that take us on an adventure, right? And that's what you're supposed to do as an artist. Take the same things that they've done before you, all of the building blocks, the foundations, and put it into your own world. In my own comic cover here, I've kind of designed a very simplistic city backdrop to kind of make it feel more lively. I wanted to have the feel of a villain looming over the city, right? Alluding to the nice Silver Age Doctor Doom ready to defeat the Fantastic Four. He was always this menace lurking over New York City, right? There's a lot of these kind of things that echo throughout my work, right? The early appreciation for Marvel, the early appreciation for DC, and I love having these kind of colors, these kinds of compositions to really just attract the attention of the audience. You have to be able to discern what is needed and what isn't. These cities are almost always minimalistic enough, in simple little blocks and bricks for you to understand that there is a city there. It does not need to be perfect. It does not need to be super perspective-y. It doesn't need to, you don't have to put out rulers and things. Just as long as it feels like a city you could immerse yourself in, then that's all that matters. Most of the time, comic book covers break the immersion of a setting because ultimately it's representing a graphic image. It's supposed to be nice to look at, right? We don't have to draw every single sidewalk, every single light, every single thing. That's not the point. The whole point of it is to create something that feels otherworldly, right? That's bigger than itself. We're representing the entire story as a whole. I will constantly refer back to this phrase because that's really what it is. These comic book covers throughout all of time have been decorated as these things that can stand alone as posters. These are things that are represented not only as posters but as tattoos, as images on walls, as murals, as painted arts, Think about Alex Ross's work. His work directly takes inspiration from these comic book covers and adapts them in such a stylistic way, using gouache paint, using things that we haven't even thought of. And he represents them in a hyper-realized way, but still keeping the imagination and the rawness of what a superhero represents. Alex Ross is a huge inspiration for everything that I do. Even though I'm not a painter, his compositions, his ideas, his character designs, his attention to detail, and his immersion to the world around the character is integral for everything that he does and his success. If you guys have never read the Marvels comic book, I highly recommend it. It literally takes the perspective of an individual who is a photographer in the Marvel universe, and the entire thing is painted and illustrated in his art style. And if you haven't read Kingdom Come, which is a war between good and evil, angels and devils, by Alex Ross in the DC universe, then please go check out these masterpieces. These are things that are not to be overlooked. Not only are the covers important, but ultimately the story is represented through these covers. You have to think of it not only as a poster for selling, but for promotion. This is the thing that's supposed to grab the attention of people. This is what's going to take them into the world and want them to buy the book. This is promotion. Any random stranger could walk past this and agree that, oh, this is a cool thing. Oh, this is something I'd be interested in. This is something I kind of want to check out. Hey, what is that? Can I read this? Where is this? Where can I find this? Oh, okay. And you have to have the information easy to read. A comic book is an event. Think about it. It's like going to a concert. You're paying for it. Except the thing is, you own it. And it's timeless. You can reread it, re-experience it. And every time, if it's done correctly, if it's done right, if it's an actual proper comic book, then every time you reread it, you will find something more than you found before. You'll make connections. You'll find, you'll go back to it and find new things. Personally, whenever I reread Sin City by Frank Miller, every time I read Watchmen by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, I always find something more. There's always a connection there. There's always something more to it that I never found before. Whenever I enjoy the Fantastic Four, no matter how many times I've read these stories, it's like watching my favorite episode of a show. It's something that you can repeat. That's the entire point, is rereadability. If you can go watch a movie and say, oh, this is rewatchable. Oh, if you like a song, oh, this is re-listenable. If this is replayable, right? It has replay value. Comic books are the same thing. It's an experience. It is something that is, brought into the real world. It's old school but modern, and it's kind of a niche thing, but it's kind of like for people who, there's fans of vinyl, people who buy vinyl records. A comic book is the exact same kind of concept. It's this retro vintage thing that's enjoyed by a specific niche of people. Ultimately, it's for all ages. Comic books are for everyone. Right? And these are the things that we must keep in mind while we're making them. Ultimately, we gotta remember that the story is important, but at the end of the day, there are still people who buy it 1,000 times, right? The modern fascination for variant comics, right, for variant covers of the same issue has gone up, it's literally gone up in so much value because we love the decoration of it. We appreciate the cover so much more than ultimately than the final product. Sometimes I'll go out of my way to not buy a specific alternate just because I want a specific cover. I would go out of my way to completely stop reading an entire series until I find the third or fourth issue that I need with the specific cover that I want. It always ends up being an Alex Ross cover that I always, wait out for because it's just something that's, it elevates it to the next level. And frankly, it's just one of my favorite artists. Other than that, there's always the chance you'll find a Mike Mignola piece. And his art style is impeccable. Its simplicity, its minimalism is taken up to the next level because it's so hyper stylized. It has so much attention to detail. It has so much care and love put into every single line that it really just makes you think and appreciate what you have. Whenever I read Hellboy, I absolutely love just getting lost in the little drawings, right? The simplicity of its lines give away this entire illusion of a grand world being there. I wanted to briefly go back and just appreciate some of the best covers that I've ever seen in my life. From the top of my head, I already know that some of the Todd McFarlane Spider-Man is one of the most remade covers. There's so many variants that allude to it, including his own Spawn series. With the Spawn 300, he alluded to the old Spider-Man 300 that he made. I absolutely love these covers because each time he would put attention to detail. He would always highlight each little thing with a bunch of spiders adorning the whole thing, and there's the beauty of playing with gimmicks, right? The covers might be holographic, it may have embossing, it may have some metallic quality to it, a little bit of felt, or it might be a matte cover. I absolutely love when people play with the textures involved. And then in the actual design themselves, the artists sometimes even incorporate that texture to push that idea even further. With my own work, I loved giving it this retro kind of grungy feel. I like giving it this kind of tattered old newsprint. Even though it's modern, even though it's digital, I want to allude back to where these things came from, right? These discardable, old, kind of wrinkly, kind of broken down comic books. That's literally what I love. Whenever I see an old comic on eBay, I always take reference and take note of how it looks, or on Amazon even. I always see the edges, I always see the corners, the creases, how much this person probably loved this comic. Sometimes it has the stickers of the store, the little prices, it may have a little bit of marker writing on it. It's always just that next level of detail, that little bit of realism. These are things that I just honestly love incorporating into my own work. And I think that love really shines through, and whenever the people see it on the stands, they appreciate the amount of detail, love, and attention that was put into it. There is also one of the most important series in comic book media coming out from the Marvel Comics that utilizes the comic book cover to literally narrate an entire story within 12 issues. And it's Secret Wars. Secret Wars is absolutely one of the most interesting, most engaging, and entertaining comics I've read in a long time. And the original covers are so iconic, they're timeless. Literally everyone knows the first iteration of the Spider-Man black suit that was sent in by a fan. That design has been used and cemented forever. And then artists like McFarlane in the 90s would absolutely reinvent this character and turn it into the beloved Venom that we know today. And this, you could kind of see it echoed within his own work like Spawn. And besides Secret Wars, there's another 12-issue miniseries that is absolutely mind-blowing with its cover art design, and that is Watchmen. Watchmen utilizes its cover art design as the first panel of the story. So when you see the book on the stands and you open it, it's literally zooming out of the same image that is seen on the cover. That is mind-blowing. That is something that I've never seen utilized before, or very rarely ever used. And that is just, goes to show how creative you could really be, how abstract you could be with these covers. They're ultimately representing an art piece on their own. I even love looking back at old underground comics such as R. Crumb, such as the Hernandez brothers from Fantagraphics, such as 8 Ball by Daniel Clowes and Ghost World. You aren't limited to just making what has been established by these creators. You can go and break the mold. In one of my earlier comics, I actually tried experimenting with Cubism, right? The art style that Picasso had innovated. And Cubism, you have to remember, it's this abstract kind of simplified form of illustrations. It's a simplified form of painting and drawing. And it's breaking down absolutely everything that Picasso knew, right? He said he had to master painting in order to be able to relearn and teach himself how to draw like a child again. He actively wanted to become more simplified when he drew, in such a way that it resonates with absolutely everyone who sees it, and they understand it as a strange three-dimensional image. So in my original old comic, I actually played with this kind of style and recreated it, being inspired by cartoons such as The Jetsons, Samurai Jack, and Dexter's Laboratory, right? These simple kind of styles. These kinds of styles for animation were definitely spearheaded by Genndy Tartakovsky and Bruce Timm. These kind of simplified forms were really invented by the amazing Alex Toth, who created Space Ghost and Johnny Quest. I personally love and admire animation's art style, and I think that resonates very deeply and echoes throughout my work, especially now with Junket. And my early comic Gunny most definitely played with this kind of simplified style and this retro kind of feel. I love delving into these kinds of abstract ideas and taking inspiration from absolutely everything I love, because ultimately that's what it is. A comic book is your labor of love. You're meant to make something that's not only for the world but for you. This is something that's going to be on your bookshelf forever. This is something that you might potentially pass on to your siblings, your kids, your nieces, your nephews, whoever is here is going to read it. Imagine one day you proudly give your comic book to your grandchild. That's powerful. That's beautiful. And then you explain to them the things that inspired them, that inspired these images, and you see their eyes light up with the magic that you brought them. That's priceless. So you have to try your best and break out of every box that they try to put you in. You can reinvent yourself 1,000 times. As long as your ideas are carried across and are interesting, captivating, and beautiful and pleasing to the eye, then that's all that matters. Ultimately, comics aren't limited to just little picture books for kids. At the end of the day, it can be something that's much more. It represents art at its finest. It represents the future, the past, and most importantly, the present. Comic books echo everything that we feel now. Everything that we're living must be included in it now. Another one of my great inspirations, Tarantino, one of my favorite directors of all time. He said something that stuck with me forever. And I'm paraphrasing here, but he said something like, if whatever you're going through now is not represented in the thing that you're making currently, then don't make it at all. It's gotta be what everyone's feeling. It's gotta be what the world is feeling. It has to be for the present. And at a first glance, a simple comic book cover might not be the most prolific, the most poetic, the most profound image of all time. At a first glance, nothing looks like that. No simple sentence or little words strung together by an old poet who's dead. It might not seem all that deep, it might not seem all that meaningful, but if you look closer, if you try to find the meaning within it, because there's always something more that the artist intended. So why be any less than the greats? You are the next generation of creators. You are the future of the medium, and only you can push it to the next level. So why limit yourself? Break out of the box. Go do what you love. So sharpen your pencils, go out there, and make something that's timeless. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Please comment, like, subscribe, and put notifications on to stay updated. Check out my self-published book on Amazon titled Junket: Hidden Worlds Revealed Part 1. I'm also live streaming on Twitch where you can see behind the scenes of me actually making the artwork from scratch. Go ahead and follow me on Instagram to stay up to date with everything that I'm doing art-wise, and thank you guys so much. Peace out.